Hello dolls, and welcome back to another video. Welcome to the second part of my Black History Month series, where I want to share the light on the incredible Black artists and movements of the 1960s. Today, I want to tell you everything about the civil rights movement of the 1960s, a movement that truly changed the world. But beyond being a very political and social movement, it was also a cultural movement. The 1960s saw this huge rise in Black artists making music, being represented in films and cinema. And I feel like this is an aspect of the civil rights movement that isn't talked about too much. So today, I would like to tell you how the civil rights movement of the 1960s changed the world and culture. The 1960s civil rights movement was not just a pivotal chapter in American history. It was a global beacon for justice, equality, and human rights. Its influence stretched far beyond the borders of the United States, inspiring movements worldwide and laying the groundwork for the ongoing fight against oppression. The lessons learned, the struggles fought, and the victories achieved in the civil rights movement continue to resonate today, impacting global conversations about race, justice, and human dignity. The fight for civil rights in the United States had its roots long before the 1960s, with generations of activists from Frederick Douglass to Rosa Parks laying the groundwork for the seismic shift that would unfold during this decade. However, the 1960s marked a unique moment of dramatic, visible progress, as the movement reached its peak, characterized by mass protests, landmark legal victories, and courageous individuals who risked their life to challenge systematic racism. The Supreme Court's decision in Brown v. Board of Education in 1954, declaring segregation in public schools unconstitutional, was a monumental legal victory. It energized activists across the country, signaling that change was not just a distant dream, but a tangible reality that could be achieved through a combination of legal challenges, peaceful protests, and collective action. The struggles from the sit-ins and marches to the passage of landmark legislations demonstrated that the fight for civil rights was far more than a national issue. It was a global call for justice, setting the stage for future movements dedicated to equality, freedom, and human rights. In this video, I want to explore how the civil rights movement of the 1960s not only reshaped the political landscape of the United States, but also spurred a broader cultural shift that altered art, music, fashion, and global activism, inspiring generations to come. Even though I want to put my main focus on the 1960s today, there was a very pivotal moment in the mid-1950s that I felt like was very important for this video. In 1955, Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on a segregated bus in Montgomery, Alabama, an act of defiance that sparked the Montgomery Bus Boycott. Rosa, a seamstress and a seasoned activist with the NAACP, was not the first person to resist the bus segregation, but her quiet dignity and resolve captured the nation's attention. Her arrest ignited a year-long boycott of the Montgomery bus system by the African American community, a campaign that severely impacted the city's transit revenue and highlighted the economic power of organized protest. This pivotal event introduced the world to Martin Luther King Jr., a young pastor at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, who was chosen to lead the Montgomery Improvement Association, short MIA, the organization spearheading the boycott. Despite facing threats, harassment, and even the bombing of his home, King remained steadfast. His philosophy of nonviolent resistance, inspired by Mahatma Gandhi, emphasized peaceful protest as a powerful tool against injustice. King believed that the moral high ground and nonviolent discipline could expose the brutality of segregationists to the broader public, including sympathetic white allies and international audiences. Martin Luther King's leadership during the boycotts demonstrated the effectiveness of organized nonviolent actions. Under his guidance, the African American community of Montgomery maintained the boycott for over a year, relying on carpools, walking miles to work, and building networks of mutual support. The unity and resilience of the community became a model for future civil rights campaigns. Ultimately, the Supreme Court ruled that bus segregation was unconstitutional, marking a significant victory for the movement. The Montgomery Bus Boycott was more than a boycott against segregated seating. It was a transformative moment that galvanized a national movement. It showcased the power of grassroots activism, the importance of strategic leadership, and the profound impact of collective action. Moreover, It established Martin Luther King Jr. as a national figure and symbol of the broader struggles for civil rights, setting the stage for his leadership in subsequent campaigns for justice and equality. And by doing so, it ushered in the decade that's arguably the most influential to the civil rights movement. In 1960, the Greensboro sit-ins marked a new chapter. 4 African-American college students in North Carolina sat at a segregated Woolworth lunch counter, refusing to leave until they were served. Their peaceful protest inspired sit-ins across the South and led to the formation of the Student Nonviolent Coordination Committee, short SNCC, a key organization in the fight for the civil rights movement. Young people became the backbone of the movement, demonstrating courage and resilience in the face of violence and arrests. One of the most iconic moments of the 1960s was the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom in 1963. Over 250,000 people gathered at the Lincoln Memorial, where Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his "I Have a Dream" speech. His words, "I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed," resonated with the millions and became a defining moment in American history. The march highlighted the demand for economic justice alongside racial equality, emphasizing the interconnectedness of civil and economic rights. In 1964, the Civil Rights Act was signed into law, a monumental achievement that prohibited discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. This legislation was a direct result of the relentless activism and sacrifices of countless individuals. On March 7, 1965, over 600 civil rights activists set out from Selma, Alabama, to march to the state capital of Montgomery, demanding their right to vote. As they crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge, they were met by state troopers and local law enforcement who brutally attacked them with clubs, tear gas, and whips. The shocking images of peaceful protesters being beaten and trampled were broadcasted on national television, igniting outrage across the country. This pivotal moment forced the nation to confront the brutal realities of racial injustice and created immense pressure on political leaders to act. Just months later, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act of 1965 into law, a transformative piece of legislation that aimed to eliminate barriers to voting for African Americans, particularly in the South. Many other leaders made significant contributions that shaped its direction and broadened its impact. Malcolm X, with his emphasis on Black empowerment, self-determination, and the right to self-defense, challenged the movement to consider more radical strategies beyond nonviolent protest. His advocacy for Black pride and Pan-Africanism resonated deeply, influencing the rise of the Black Power movement. Fannie Lou Hamer's powerful testimony before the Democratic National Convention in 1964 laid bare the brutal realities of voter suppressions and racial violence in the South, famously declaring, quote, "I am sick and tired of being sick and tired." Her courage brought national attention to the struggles faced by Black voters in Mississippi. Ella Baker, often working behind the scenes, was a master organizer whose belief in grassroots leadership helped shape the Student Nonviolent Coordination Committee. She mentored young activists, emphasizing the importance of collective action over charismatic leadership, which made the movement more resilient and inclusive. The civil rights movement also had a profound impact on the burgeoning women's rights movement, as many women who fought for racial justice applied their organization skills and activist experience to fight for gender equality. Figures like Angela Davis connected the struggles against racism, sexism, and capitalism, and highlighted the deep intersection between racial and gender oppression. Her activism, rooted in both the civil rights and the Black Power movements, expanded feminist discourse to include issues like mass incarceration and economic justice. The formation of the National Organization of Women, short NOW, in 1966 marked the formal rise of second-wave feminism, which sought to address systematic inequalities beyond the right to vote. Advocating for workplace discrimination, protections, reproductive rights, and an end to gender-based violence, second-wave feminists were deeply influenced by the strategies, rhetoric, and the coalition-building techniques honed during the civil rights struggles. But the movement also faced some devastating losses. Malcolm X's assassination on February 21st, 1965 deeply shook the civil rights movement and the broader landscape of black activism in America. Malcolm had evolved from a radical leader of the Nation of Islam, advocating for black separatism and empowerment, to an advocate for unity and global human rights after his pilgrimage to Mecca. His tragic death marked the end of an era for the Nation of Islam and left a void in the leadership of the black community. Malcolm X's assassination also heightened the sense of urgency within the movement, especially for younger, more militant groups, such as the Black Panther Party. Don't you worry, we'll talk about them in just a second. Who shared his ideas of black pride, self-defense, and political activism. Though his life and beliefs were polarizing, his death served to unite many in the struggle for racial justice, and his legacy became a symbol of resistance, challenging both the status quo of black submission and the passive approach of mainstream civil rights organizations. Globally, his assassination brought attention to the plight of black Americans and inspired solidarity movements in Africa, the Caribbean, and beyond, cementing his role as an icon of black empowerment and activism. Only 3 years later, the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. on April 4th in 1968 was another devastating blow to the civil rights movement and the fight for racial equality in America. King had come to embody the ideals of nonviolent resistance, justice, and peace, and his death shattered the hopes of millions that had rallied around his message of love and unity. His assassination ignited riots in cities across the United States, with grief and anger erupting in response to the loss of the man who had led the movement to unprecedented heights. For many, King's death signified not just the loss of a great leader, but the silencing of the moral conscience of the nation. It also marked a shift in the movement, as many of his followers began to embrace more radical approaches, seeing that nonviolence alone could not fully address the systematic racism and economic injustices that plagued black communities. On a global scale, King's assassination reverberated beyond American borders, becoming a symbol of the struggle for justice and human rights worldwide. While his death prompted deep sorrow, it also galvanized the movement, ensuring that his legacy would continue to inspire future generations of activists fighting for racial equality, social justice, and the dignity of all people. If there's one group that stands for the more radical part of the 1960s civil rights movement, it is the Black Panther Party. Founded in 1966 in Oakland, California by Huey Newton and Bobby Seale, it was meant to be a response to the systematic police brutality against black communities. They aimed to empower African Americans through self-defense and social programs with their famous slogan, "All power to the people," encapsulating their beliefs in self-determination and the need for direct action. The Black Panthers were revolutionary socialists who advocated for black liberation, but they were also heavily involved in community service initiatives, such as free breakfast programs for children and health clinics. Their militant stance and willingness to confront police, along with their iconic black berets and raised fists, make them controversial. While supporters saw them as champions of justice and equality, their aggressive tactics and socialist ideology led to negative portrayals in the media and government crackdowns, including FBI surveillance and COINTELPRO operations aimed at discrediting them. Despite the controversy, the Black Panther Party remains an essential chapter in the history of the civil rights movement, representing both the struggle for black power and the fight against racial oppression. But if you ask me, even more controversial was the COINTELPRO itself. COINTELPRO is short for Counterintelligence Program, which was a covert and often illegal operation conducted by the FBI from 1956 to 1971. Its purpose was to surveil, infiltrate, discredit, and disrupt domestic political organizations that the government viewed as subversive or radical. One of its most well-known targets was the Black Panther Party, but it also targeted other civil rights groups such as Martin Luther King Jr.'s Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the American Indian Movement, and anti-war activists. COINTELPRO used a variety of tactics, including spreading false rumors, forging documents, planting informants, and using psychological warfare to undermine the credibility of leaders and their movements. The program was exposed to the public in 1971, leading to a quite significant and rightfully so outrage, as well as congressional hearings that revealed the extent of the FBI's surveillance and harassment of activists, raising important questions about civil liberties and government overreach. The Black Panthers were controversial, and supporting them was risky. I actually learned about the Black Panther Party because I read about Jean Seberg, and I feel like her story belongs in here because it truly shows how the COINTELPRO ruined lives. Jean Seberg was an American actress best known for her role in the 1960s cult classic Breathless. She became linked to the Black Panther Party due to her activism during the 1960s. Jean was an outspoken supporter of civil rights and a critic of racial inequality, which led her to publicly support the Black Panther Party in the late 1960s. She donated money to the party and used her position as a Hollywood star to raise awareness about their cause. Her public support of the Black Panthers drew the attention of the FBI, which viewed her as a threat because of her ties to the party and her activism. The FBI launched an extensive covert campaign against Jean as part of its COINTELPRO operations, solely aimed at discrediting her. The FBI targeted Jean with harassment, including the deliberate spreading of false rumors about her, such as claims that she was pregnant by Black Panther Raymond Hewitt. These efforts were solely designed to damage her reputation and discourage her activism. The psychological toll of this campaign, along with the media backlash, contributed to Jean's emotional distress, and she struggled with severe mental health issues for years to follow. What I found particularly heartbreaking about this is that because these rumors of her being pregnant by a Black Panther, even though she always said that she did not have that kind of relationship with any one of them and she just wanted them to succeed because she was all for the cause, just like them, but it actually pushed her into having reporters come in right after her child was born and let them take pictures that were published all over the country to prove that her child was not Black. And this pains me in so many ways. It is just unbelievable to me that the government ruined lives just because the Black community and their allies wanted more rights for them. Jean's story is so tragic because it truly shows how the government tried to silence all of these important voices and so many people who fought for change. But the decade also marked a pivotal era in the evolution of Black culture and identity in America, giving rise to a powerful movement that celebrated Black pride, resilience, and beauty. Black is Beautiful became more than just a slogan. It was a revolution of self-expression and self-love, challenging centuries of racial oppression and redefining what it meant to be Black in America. Fueled by the civil rights movement, the Black Power movement, and the rise of influential figures like Malcolm X, Stokely Carmichael, and Angela Davis, this era saw a flourishing of Black art, music, fashion, and intellectual thought. The concept of Black beauty was reclaimed, moving away from the Eurocentric standards and embracing natural hair, darker skin tones, and African cultural heritage. This cultural renaissance had a profound impact on how Black Americans viewed themselves and their place in society, igniting a transformation that resonated far beyond the confines of race and reshaped the cultural landscape for generations to come. The phrase "Black is Beautiful" referred to a broad embrace of Black culture and identity. It called for an appreciation of the Black past, of a worthy legacy, and inspired cultural pride in contemporary Black achievements. This movement wasn't just about aesthetics. It was a declaration of self-worth and defiance against societal norms that had long marginalized Black features, history, and contributions. In its philosophy, Black is Beautiful focused on emotional and psychological well-being, encouraging Black people to reject Eurocentric beauty standards. The movement, affirmed by natural hairstyles like the Afro, celebrated a variety of skin tones, hair textures, and physical characteristics within the African American community. Pride in one's appearance became intertwined with political expression. Using an Afro pig adorned with a Black fist symbol, for example, was both a fashion statement and a powerful assertion of solidarity with the Black Power movement. This cultural revolution extended far beyond personal identity into the realms of art, literature, and scholarship. Writers like Amiri Baraka ignited the Black arts movement, advocating for creative works rooted in Black experiences rather than filtered through the white cultural lenses. Founding of the Black Arts Repertory Theater and School in Harlem and Spirit House in Newark inspired similar initiatives worldwide. As Hoyt Fuller observed in 1968, "Across this country, young Black men and women have been infected with a fever of affirmation. They are saying, "We are black and beautiful." Music became another vehicle for pride and protest. James Brown's 1968 anthem, "Say It Loud, I'm Black and Proud," captured the essence of the era's defiant self-assertion. He sang, "Some people say we got a lot of malice. Some say it's a lot of nerve. But I say we won't quit moving until we get what we deserve." I wish I could play that for you, but unfortunately I'll get copyright striked and this video will get taken down immediately. So I just wanted to read you the lyrics because I thought that they were quite interesting and important. The 1960s was a time when music not only mirrored the social changes of the era, but also actively shaped the cultural and political landscape, especially for black musicians. Artists like Sam Cooke and Bob Dylan used their platforms to speak out against inequality and inspire change. Sam Cooke's "A Change Is Gonna Come" became an anthem of hope for those fighting for civil rights, while Bob Dylan's folk classic, "The Times They Are A-Changing," captured the broader societal shifts, encouraging unity and action. Amid these politically charged times, black musicians also redefined their presence on the cultural stage. The late Jimi Hendrix, with his revolutionary guitar style and electrifying performances, became a symbol of artistic freedom and defiance. His appearance at Woodstock in 1969, where he famously performed a dramatic, feedback-heavy rendition of the Star-Spangled Banner, not only solidified his legacy, but also represented a moment of cultural rebellion. For black artists, playing at major festivals like Woodstock was a double-edged sword. It was an opportunity to break into the mainstream and be part of the cultural movement, but also a space where they had to navigate racial dynamics in predominantly white settings. Despite this, musicians like Jimi Hendrix, along with Marsha Hunt, another singer and actress who performed at some of the era's most important festivals, proved that their artistry was not only relevant, but vital to the larger conversation of freedom, resistance, and transformation. The 1960s also saw the rise of gospel, soul, and jazz artists who became intertwined with the civil rights struggles. Gospel singers like Mahalia Jackson and soul icons like Aretha Franklin infused their music with the message of resilience and faith, filling churches and protests alike with songs that moved and inspired. For many black musicians, the stage became more than just a platform for entertainment. It was a space to vocalize the collective struggles of the African American community and bring attention to the injustice they faced. The combination of music and activism created an atmosphere of unity and empowerment, helping fuel the civil rights movements and forge new pathways for future generations of artists. But there was one music genre in particular that was crucial to bringing black voices to the mainstream. Motown, founded by Berry Gordy in 1959 in Detroit, became an iconic sound of black America in the 1960s. Known for its polished crossover appeal, Motown blended soul, pop, and R&B to create hits that resonated with both black and white audiences. The label launched the careers of legends like The Supremes, Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye, and The Temptations, shaping the era's music and culture. With its distinctive production line approach to artist development, Motown not only produced chart-topping singles, but also helped break down racial barriers in mainstream music, leaving a lasting impact on both music and society. I'm actually thinking about making a whole separate video all about Motown because it is so important in the history of black musicians in America. So if you would like to see that as another part of my Black History Month series this February, let me know. Popular culture too began to shift. Movies like the 1967 film Guess Who's Coming to Dinner were groundbreaking for their depiction of interracial relationships at a time when such marriages were still a sensitive and controversial topic. The film challenged racial taboos, offering a view into the complexities of race and love in America. Just months after the landmark Supreme Court ruling in Loving v. Virginia from 1967, which legalized interracial marriage nationwide. Sidney Poitier made history at the 1964 Academy Awards by becoming the first black actor to win the Oscar for Best Actor. He won for his role in Lilies of the Field from 1963, where he played a handyman who helped a group of nuns build a chapel. His win was groundbreaking, as it not only highlighted his talent, but also symbolized a shift toward more substantive roles for black actors in mainstream Hollywood films. Television also began to evolve, providing new opportunities for Black representation and breaking away from stereotypical portrayals. The TV show Julia, which ran from 1968 to 1979 and starred Diane Carroll as a professional, educated single mother, was groundbreaking because it presented a Black woman in a leading role that was independent, sophisticated, and career-focused, far removed from the typical roles of maids or servants. At the same time, shows like Soul and Black Journal gave Black artists, activists, and intellectuals a platform to address the issues central to the Black community, such as the rise of the Black Power movement, changing gender roles, and family dynamics. These shows gave voice to a new generation of Black Americans, demanding change and representation, reflecting the broader societal transformations occurring during the era. Tony Brown's 1970 declaration captured the spirits of the time perfectly. Television is on the brink of a revolutionary change, not because they like Black people, but because Black people too own the airwaves and are forcing them to change. Black Americans were increasingly asserting their influence over media, shifting from being passive subjects of representation to active participants in the creation and production of cultural content. This change was further exemplified by Soul Train, which began in 1971 as a groundbreaking televised dancing show. Hosted by Don Cornelius, Soul Train not only showcased the latest in Black music, but it also became a cultural institution. The show spotlighted soul, funk, and R&B acts like James Brown, the Jackson 5, and Aretha Franklin, while also highlighting Black fashion and dance moves. Soul Train offered a space where Black joy, creativity, and expression could be celebrated, and it reflected the broader cultural renaissance happening across America. In many ways, it encapsulated the fusion of culture and activism of the time, proving that the civil rights movement wasn't just about political change, but about reshaping the very fabric of American culture itself. Soul Train became a platform for Black pride and unity, helping to carve out a new, more powerful cultural identity in mainstream America. I am very much considering Soul Train to be another separate episode of this month's series, just because there is so much there. It's such a wonderful series, and I have been seeing clips circulate every now and then, but I feel like people don't really put into perspective how revolutionary and groundbreaking this show was. The impact of the civil rights movement extended far beyond the United States. It inspired anti-apartheid activists in South Africa, civil rights advocates in Northern Ireland, and indigenous rights movements in Australia and Canada. The movement demonstrated the power of nonviolent protests and grassroots organization, principles that continue to influence contemporary movements like Black Lives Matter. The civil rights movement of the 1960s marked a defining moment in American history, one that not only reshaped the nation's laws but also its cultural and social fabric. The movement, fueled by the courage of countless individuals and communities, ignited change that continued to resonate through our fight for justice today. While significant victories were achieved during the era, the struggles for racial equality and human dignity highlighted the deep-rooted challenges still present in American society. But the legacy of the movement is not only visible in the legal and political reforms it spurred, but also in the profound changes it brought to American culture, especially in the realms of art, music, and film. The music of the 1960s became an outlet for Black expression and activism. The emergence of soul, jazz, and funk provided powerful anthems of empowerment, capturing the emotional intensity of the struggle and giving voices to the frustrations of Black Americans. Music became an essential tool for uniting communities, fueling protests, and challenging societal norms. In film, the changing social climate was reflected in the emergence of narratives that explored race relations, prejudice, and the complexities of American identity. Filmmakers began addressing themes of racial injustice, portraying interracial relationships and the tensions of the era. This shift in storytelling brought new perspectives to the forefront, challenging old stereotypes and shedding a light on the experiences of marginalized communities. The art world also experienced a renaissance, with Black artists using their work to both confront racism and celebrate their cultural heritage. Through visual art, the movement was able to communicate complex ideas about Black identity and resistance, while also fostering pride in Black culture and history. These changes in art, music, and film were more than just cultural expressions. They were integral parts of the movement, amplifying its message and ensuring its reach across all facets of society. The civil rights movement inspired a cultural revolution that continues to shape contemporary art, music, and film. Its influence can be seen in today's ongoing push for representation, inclusion, and justice, as the creative fields continue to provide platforms for marginalized voices and challenge the status quo. The movement's cultural impact reminds us that activism is not only about policy change, but also about transforming how we see ourselves and each other through the stories we tell and the art we create. Although the civil rights movement achieved significant legal and societal changes, its fight for equality is ongoing. Systematic racism, voter suppression, and economic disparities persist, reminding us that the movement's work is far from over. However, its legacy lives on in the continued efforts of activists, policymakers, and ordinary citizens who believe in justice and equality for all. As Martin Luther King Jr. famously said, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice." The civil rights movement of the 1960s bent that arc with courage, conviction, and an unwavering belief in the power of people to change the world. Its lessons continue to inspire new generations to stand up, speak out, and demand a fair and equal society. So that is it for today's video. That is everything that I wanted to tell you about the civil rights movement and how it influenced culture. As said, I think I'm gonna make a video about Soul Train and then one about Motown, but if there's anything else or you have any thoughts and feelings, let me know in the comments. I would love to know how you feel about this, because I went to school in Europe, and while we definitely talked about the American history, we did not talk about this modern part of American history too much. So I found that out a little later in life, when I was maybe like 17, 18, started to do a little more research. And it is so interesting to me because it feels like such a modern movement. As mentioned earlier, the Black Lives Matter movement feels pretty similar to the civil rights movement back there, and it just shows us that even though these people have already done so much work, there's still so much more to do. And that is the main reason why I'm doing this, because I want to shine a light on Black artists and Black history, because it is so truly important for us as an entire society and as a world to just treat people equal and fair. But yeah, that is it for today, and I really hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you have a beautiful day. Go out, enjoy the sunshine or maybe the snow. It's been snowing all day here, but it is too warm for it to actually stick, so it's just gray, cold, and snowy without any snow staying. So not the perfect weather, but we're gonna work with it. Take yourself some time to focus on you and your mental health today, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye, dolls.